Hello, my name is Ron Johnson, and I want to talk to you about one of God's purposes for your life according to Romans chapter 12, verse 2, which says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." So Paul, in context, is talking about being transformed into the image of Christ. One of his purposes, God's purposes for all of our lives, is to become more and more like Jesus. In Genesis chapter 3, we perfectly bore the image of Christ. We were like these perfect mirrors that were unbroken, and when people saw us, we reflected back to the watching world what God looks like when God puts on flesh. But most of you know the story. We sinned against God, and the mirror got broken, the image got broken, and so God wants to transform us by the renewing of our mind. So here's my insight for you. If you want to fulfill this purpose for your life, if you want to be morphed into the image of Christ, you have to renew your nous. So let me explain. The word for transform in this verse, Romans 12:2, in Greek, it's morph. Like a chrysalis being morphed into a butterfly. God wants to morph you. He wants to morph me back into the image of Christ. The way he does that is renewing our nous. Nous means mind. So if we want to be morphed into the image of Christ, we have to renew our nous. How do we do that? I want to suggest a tool. So I have this tool, I call it my testimonies, and I have a list of temptations, lies I believe, things I'm tempted to do, things I don't want to be, and next to those temptations, I place verses. And then below the verse, I will put a testimony, something I believe is true about me based on who Christ says I am. Let me give you an example. For the most part, I'm pretty optimistic, but when I'm tired or I've blown something, I've not performed well, or I've misbehaved in some way, I can get really down on myself. And I can get kind of melancholy, and I can spiral into that place of poor me. And so when I find myself doing that, I think about one of God's truths. And the one I like to think about is 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 18. Rejoice always, pray continuously, give thanks in all circumstances. And so I create a testimony out of that. My testimony is this: I choose to be joyful and prayerful and grateful. When I'm tempted to be melancholy and get depressed, I choose to be joyful and prayerful and grateful. Do you see how that worked? When I do that, I start thinking differently. I start behaving differently. Before I know it, I'm out of my little melancholic spiral, and I'm back to being the kind of person that Jesus has made me to be. So, if you want to fulfill God's purpose for your life, one of which is to become more like Jesus, if you want to morph into the image of Jesus, then I would encourage you to renew your nous.